What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Eric Wilson, today joined by my co-host, Anthony Rivardo. We've spent the last couple of episodes talking about the present, what the Rangers can do to make this team win a Stanley Cup now, but with the NHL draft coming up at the end of this month, figured it's time to start talking about the future a little bit. As the draft gets closer, our draft coverage will start to ramp up. So if you want to be following that, make sure you guys like, subscribe, and ring that bell so to miss notification. Today, we're going to be talking about what the Rangers should do with this pick. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about one of these guys I think the Rangers might be inclined to draft, but we'll see what they decide to do. But yeah, make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. Anthony, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, just hanging out, enjoying the offseason, I guess. Not really kind of depressed that the Rangers aren't playing right now. Florida Panthers in it versus Edmonton. We'll see how it goes. Not really rooting for either team, just rooting against everybody because I wish that the Rangers were in the Stanley Cup Finals. But, taking a look at this offseason, obviously we've been talking about some of the free agency moves and trade moves that the Rangers could potentially make. But the draft looms large. The Rangers, as we've discussed in recent episodes, need to keep adding to their prospect pool. A lot of the talent on this team is in its 30s. We've got players who are 33, major contributors for us, not going to be here all that much longer. What is life like after Artemi Panarin, life after Zibanejad, life after Kreider? The only way that we find out is by getting some solid prospects in here and setting ourselves up for a bright future. So while the Rangers do have a few prospects that we really like, obviously Brennan Othmann, Gabriel Perreault, there's other players as well. They still need to focus on this draft, land some more talent. They really need to land somebody good in that first-round pick because they don't have a second or third-round pick. So they do have to focus on adding talent that can develop into an eventual starter in the first round this year. So I'm excited to go ahead and kind of discuss some of the moves that they could make with their draft pick.
Yeah, there's a lot of options they have here. And, we're all happy that the Rangers made it pretty far into this year's playoffs. But the unfortunate thing that has come from it is that their first-round pick isn't that high. They currently have the 30th overall selection in the first round out of 32 total picks, so pretty close to the bottom there. So, it's the first round. So I feel like no matter who you draft at what position, you're going to get someone who's going to turn into a solid NHL player. Obviously, Celebrini is going to go number 1 overall. He's going to be a generational talent. Rangers aren't going to get a guy like that. I mean, maybe if Drury goes absolutely crazy in this year's draft, but we're going to get someone solid at 30. But, with the future up in the air and questionably, the Rangers could possibly trade up and maybe try to get a better star. In my opinion, I think it would be best to just sit at number 30. When you talk about trading up, the Rangers would have to lose some of their other prospects that they have in their pool. I think by now the Rangers have established that Perreault isn't going anywhere. We talk about trade discussions. Othmann, I think there's a higher chance he could be moved, but I personally wouldn't like to see it. And then, outside of that, there's kind of a large drop-off in the quality of Rangers prospects. I know Edstrom is a decent player, but, involving him in a trade piece, it's not going to get you very far. Zach Jones is ready to be an NHL player. I'd rather just keep him on the roster. And then if you want to trade up into like a top 3 pick, it's going to cost way too much. I mean, you look at this year's draft and pretty much any draft, normally the top 2 picks automatically make the NHL. The 3rd overall pick, maybe. It's like 50-50 if they're going to play right off the bat. But then other than that, you got guys who are going to take a couple years to fully develop before they're ready for an NHL roster. So for me, with the Rangers, a first-round pick is a first-round pick. Don't waste any of your assets trading up. I would rather just stay where we are, or if you're going to not use this pick, trade the pick for some top, like package it with another pick or something and package it for a top prospect who's maybe ready to break into the NHL soon. But I feel like that's unlikely to happen, in my opinion. Just stay at number 30, scout some guys, see who you can get. But I'm curious how you feel about it.
Yeah, I think, if the opportunity comes for the Rangers to trade up, it's something that you do have to consider. But again, looking at their draft capital and knowing that to trade up, you're probably sacrificing some draft capital to make that move. I don't think it should happen. The Rangers do have a first-round pick this year, next year, and the following, but they don't have a second-round pick in any of those 3 years, and they don't have a third-round pick in 24 or 25, and they don't have a fourth-round pick in 25 or 26. So the first 4 rounds of the draft for the Rangers over the next 3 years, thin. I mean, considering in 2025 they're picking in the first round and the 5th round, I don't know how you can justify moving up in this draft and sacrificing any other draft picks that you may or may not have here. I mean, how do you move up in the first without giving up a second, third, or fourth? Well, the Rangers don't have a second or third, so then they're giving up a fourth, which could, be utilized to draft more young talent or even trade a mid-round pick for an established player in the league. So, as we discussed recently with Jake Gensel, we talked about how he's probably going for a mid-round pick and something else. 4th round pick could get him or could get you a prospect. Right now, the Rangers just do not have the capital to move up for any other prospects unless they feel like being really top heavy and just making a splash. Sure, you could do that, but the Rangers already are a little bit top heavy in their prospect pool, already have a couple of standouts, but the whole pool as in and of itself, I think is lacking some depth and some talent to continue to develop. So I would like to see the Rangers probably stick and pick here, just take the best player available. Ideally, you want a physical, fast, and tall forward, or you want a defenseman. I think those are probably the 2 spots that the Rangers should look. Getting somebody who's more of a bruiser and enforcer. Obviously, we have Matt Rempe. We'll see what his role looks like next year. But getting more Matt Rempe style players, probably what I'm looking for if I'm Chris Drury, or bolstering the defensive core for the Rangers with the number 30 overall pick.
Yeah, I mean, the only justification I can possibly think of from moving on from this first-round pick this year or any of the next couple of years is just the fact that the Rangers are a Stanley Cup contender. They're going to keep finishing the season high up in the standings. They're going to keep making it far in the playoffs. So realistically, like you said, we have a first-rounder this year, the following year, and the year after, I think it was. All of those are likely going to be close to the end of the first round. So I can see some justification or arguments where people would say, might as well trade those picks for players who will help us win now while we can, instead of just getting mediocre first round picks at the end of it. But like you said, I don't think those arguments go very far. We are very top heavy in our prospect pool. Perreault's going to be a star. Othman's going to be a star. But other than that, I think we need as much draft capital as we can. Just keep drafting, keep building this team from the inside. I know in the past, the Rangers haven't been very good at developing prospects, but hopefully that'll change moving forward. But Anthony, you talked about getting a player similar to Matt Rempe in size and play style. I want to bring up his name again. Brought it up a couple episodes ago, and it was brought to my attention by Statboy Steven over on Twitter. Dean Letourneau, he's a center who played for St. Andrews College this past season as an alternate captain. And what a season he had. In 56 games played, he scored 61 goals and got 66 assists for 127 points in 56 games played. Now, just upon hearing those stats, you think he's just like a quick, crafty Artemi Panarin type of player who knows how to score a lot of points. But no. This guy stands at 6'7" and is a massive power forward. I have right here elite prospects from their 2024 NHL draft guide. This is how they define his type of play. Letourneau is gigantic, but contrary to other players his size, it doesn't feel like he's trapped in his own body. He moves quite freely, especially because he uses crossover techniques to avoid the long, slower strides, and there's a good upper body / lower body separation and some agility. A lot of his offense consists of downhill attacks where he surveys pressure, drives the net with his range and size, or leverages the attention he receives to find open teammates. Now, to me, what this seems like is if just Matt Rempe knew how to skate and was really good at scoring. It seems like perfect. And I should mention a lot of the scouting reports have him ranked around pick number 30. I think from what I saw on Elite Prospects, the highest draft ranking he had was like 23rd. The lowest was like 60 something. But out of everything they had on Elite Prospects of like the 7 or 8 reports, most of them were around 30 to late 30s. So it's a guy who seems to have exactly the qualities like what the Rangers might need. And he's expected to go at a time in which the Rangers are drafting this year. So if the Rangers do end up holding on to that draft pick, I would love to see the Rangers draft this guy. It'd obviously take him a few years and probably has a lot of work. Likely defensively, haven't seen him play at all, but just based on reading his description, I feel like he needs some defensive work to get done, but don't quote me on that. Like I said, seems like Matt Rempe if he knew how to score goals. So I like him, but just based on that description, how do you feel about him, Tony?
You know how I feel about it. I mean, that's perfect. I kind of was just mentioning that I want some big enforcer, bruiser, some big guy who could score goals up on a top line for the Rangers. And then you just perfectly presented me with a player with that kind of potential. So, and of course, it is just potential. Maybe the Rangers end up drafting this kid and he doesn't end up panning out. Okay, totally fine. But I like drafting for potential. And I think that a guy like this, 6'7", 209 pounds, can score goals, pass, moves well. There's potential there. And like you said, he's going to be in a range similar to where the Rangers are drafting. He's ranked number 43 by consolidated ranking, 32 by elite prospects, 58 by THN, and then one site has him all the way up at 23, NHL Central Scouting. So, there are a lot of different rankings for him. Number 30 for Daily Faceoff, but it does sound like he's got a good chance of falling into the Rangers' lap with the number 30 pick. Maybe he could end up going a little bit further, but I like this idea. Dean Letourneau, as you mentioned, Boston College, playing with Gabe Perreault, that chemistry, that's important. They can continue to play together and maybe one day continue to play together in the AHL as well for the Hartford Wolfpack. That would be sweet. And then just continue to work their way up through the Rangers ranks and eventually onto Broadway playing for the New York Rangers. So I like this. I think that if you're going to pick one prospect that you really want the Rangers to target with that number 30 pick, this would probably be the one, unless there are any defensive prospects that you really like in or around that range. But in terms of the forwards, I mean, everything that you just described with this kid, you read off his scouting report. Like I said, there's potential there. And when you're picking number 30, as you mentioned earlier, you're not taking a generational talent that immediately starts on your first line and scores goals for you. But maybe you find a young kid like this who could develop into something in the long run. One thing that I do have to point out, though, Eric, this kid was born in 2006. We're starting to get old. We're officially starting to get old.
And I know the scariest thing is that I'm only like a week older than Alexis Lafreniere. Like me and Lafreniere could have been twins.
Wow.
That's when it started to get scary.
Yeah, makes me feel washed up. Makes me feel like I didn't do enough in my early 20s. I'm still in them, though. So the takeover, it's coming soon.
We're having a midlife crisis live on camera.
Hopefully a quarter life crisis, not a midlife crisis, but it's happening.
Being a Ranger fan takes years off of your life.
Sheesh. Yeah. It's the crisis is here. It's happening. Everybody drop some F's in the chat for Fireside Rangers.
Yeah. But yeah, it seems like we're both in agreement. Rangers should definitely keep their 30th overall pick. And we just gave one example of who we think the Rangers could possibly draft with it. But like I said at the very beginning of this episode, as the draft approaches, we'll be sure to cover a lot of other options that the Rangers have here. I know Elite Prospects does have a full 2024 NHL draft guide, so I will be studying that religiously in order to prepare for all of the content these next couple of weeks leading up to it. But that about wraps up today's episode. If you guys did enjoy, please like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss notification. We just talked about a pretty cool player. Let us know your thoughts on him down in the comment section below. Lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. Have a good one, and let's go Rangers.